is Big Podcast.
It's the marketing podcast for podcasters. Build a Big Podcast. I'm David Hooper. This podcast all about growing your podcast, building an audience, building a reputation, building a business, making money with that business, making enough money where your mother is impressed with that business. All those things and more on this episode. This one, the audio edition of my weekly newsletter, that's called Big Podcast Insider. This is issue number 178. You can find it at newsletter.bigpodcast.com. Here's what we're going to cover. Baby Reindeer. 5 questions to ask yourself when you want to get better at something. Audacity 3.5 is out. 15 podcasting lessons from George Carlin. I don't know where you are, but the Dave Ramsey imposter. Also some classified ads, things that will help you to grow your podcast, build a bigger podcast, make more money with your podcast, and make impact with your message. This episode of Build a Big Podcast is brought to you by Riverside.fm, a virtual studio that makes recording and editing at the highest quality possible, accessible to anyone. You'll start with studio quality recordings, get lightning fast editing, and using the power of AI, be able to instantly transcribe your podcast with 99% accuracy. Back in the day, used to have to hire somebody for this. You know how much it would cost? I feel like it was like $60 an hour, and that was way long ago. I used to hire a court reporter, and it was nice. She would check it pretty close to be included with Riverside.fm. You'll also get AI magic clips. That's going to transform your long-form recording into quick, snackable social media clips. Bite-sized clips with a single click, add captions and subtitles to your video. You will have branding that is a perfect match for your podcast. I want you to check it out for free. Go to Riverside.fm, sign up for a free account. You're going to get a couple of hours to do an interview, maybe 2 interviews. See what you think about it. Use all the tools that I'm talking about if you want to stick around, and you're going to want to. This is the discount code. You'll get 15% off. Big Podcast, BIGPODCAST. That'll get you 15% off. The URL to try it for free, Riverside.fm, the discount code to get 15% off. That's Big Podcast, BIGPODCAST. Here we go. From thing to thing to thing, all of them about podcasting. In between those things, just so you know that I've ended one and started another. And if you want more information, to go to newsletter.bigpodcast.com, you are going to hear this sound. That's it, like an old school children's audiobook when it's time to turn the page. And look at you, a full-grown adult, still doing it. Let's go. Baby Reindeer. Everybody is talking about this Netflix series. I started watching it after a friend of mine commented on the format and how it's narrated and shot. NPR referred to one of the major plots as the rug pull. If you want that article, I've got it linked at newsletter.bigpodcast.com. It's definitely not something you'll see on broadcast television for various reasons, yet it may get an Emmy or several. It's definitely got a buzz. Like I said, everybody's talking about it, and that's why I'm mentioning it here. For podcasters, Baby Reindeer, it's a prime example of the power of innovation. Just as this series is found to claim by breaking the mold, your podcast could benefit from creative risk that challenge the expectations of your listeners. You don't want to be so far off the deep end that they don't know what they're getting into. Some things are just weird. I run into some of these guys. No, I don't listen to podcasts. No, I just want to do my own thing. I don't want to be influenced by these other podcasts. That's not the way to do it. Listen to other podcasts. The more you consume, the more creative you are. That's usually how that works. You've got to know what you're getting into and what people expect. You've got to deliver something that somebody expects, kind of, with just a little tweak, a little bit of a change to make it more interesting. Obviously, be skillful. You need a reason for doing everything that you do. Don't just throw random stuff against the wall to see if it sticks. That's what the wacky guys are. Man, I'm just going to do this. No, that never works. This is not a creative outlet for you. This is an outlet for you to deliver something that people are going to connect with. You can be creative in that, but don't just go crazy. People talk about the Popeye movie with Robin Williams. I don't know if I completely agree with this description, but apparently Robin Williams, kind of a wacky stand-up comedy guy. Mork and Mindy, that was him being tame. It's a sitcom. He's an alien. We got it. But Popeye, woo! He was off the rails, baby. I don't know. I don't know if you know that movie. Maybe you're like, who's Robin Williams? But a big deal. a little bit off the rails. Even the biggest comics, the biggest stars, the biggest entertainers, they have their moments, especially if they're surrounded by yes men. They think, oh, I can do this. Everybody's telling them they can do it because everybody around them is making money. They're on the payroll. And they're thinking, well, I've had hit after hit after hit. And instead of worrying about that next hit, and some people do that. That's how you get into Chinese democracy territory, where you're waiting 8 years between projects. You start to doubt yourself. They're doing just the opposite of that, thinking nothing could go wrong. Kanye West is in that territory right now. Well, stuff goes wrong. So don't do that too early in your career. You don't have an excuse to do that. Keep the bounds, baby. But do check out Baby Reindeer. I think it does that while pushing the boundaries. You want to find that balance. I want to know, what do you think about Baby Reindeer? Have you seen it yet? What do you think about pushing the envelope with your podcast? What are you doing to push the envelope with your podcast? You can reach out to me. I'm on Mastodon, Blue Sky, or Threads. You can find all those links at newsletter.bigpodcast.com. This is issue number 178. Big Podcast AMP. If you like this newsletter, you're going to love Big Podcast AMP, the audio monetization program. This is a personal coaching program that will help you do 3 things. 1, grow your podcast audience. 2, get people talking about your podcast. And 3, make more money with your podcast. You can get all the details at bigpodcast.com/amp. That's bigpodcast.com/AMP. It is a long letter. Read it all. I want you to know what you're getting into. And if you're interested, do sign up. This is the cheapest way for you to work personally with me. You will get a lot out of it. I promise you. 5 questions to ask yourself when you want to be better at something. You may have heard me mention the podcast Sausage Factory before. That is a helpful framework for getting better as a podcast host. The podcast Sausage Factory is showing up every day, and you read, you improvise, and you do something that makes you think on your feet. I ask myself random questions for that. randomwordgenerator.com, Toastmasters table topics. Random question, read it right there, and go. No pausing in between. Related to this, I've got an article. I've got it linked at newsletter.bigpodcast.com, issue number 178. It talks about 5 questions to ask yourself when you want to get better at something. 1, what are you trying to improve? It doesn't have to be, I'm trying to be a better podcaster. It could be, I'm trying to get better at listening. It could be, I'm trying to ask better questions, be a better host. I'm trying to get better at prep. Something very specific is a good way to start. You can just focus on that because you know how this is. You go into an interview and you say, I'm going to be a better interviewer. Okay, what does that mean? Is that the listening? Is that the research? Is that, it all goes out the window. It's like Mike Tyson said, everybody's got a plan to get punched in the face. When you get on the air or in the session, or however you want to refer to how you're doing your interviews, you get nervous, man. Performance anxiety, red light syndrome. Focus on that one thing. That's going to get you better at that one thing. And you can start stacking those things. You get better at the one, add a second thing. Get better at that one, add a third thing. That's the first question. What are you trying to improve? The second, what's your current process for trying to improve? Say you're trying to be a better listener. My current process, if I'm trying to be a better listener, is 1, shut up after I ask the question. Don't say anything for at least 30 seconds. Get a timer if you need to. I'm going to look at the person. I'm going to listen to them. I'm not going to check the phone while they're saying something to me. What's your current process for trying to improve? Number 3, what are the biggest roadblocks to your process? Let's talk about checking your phone while you're doing a podcast. Do you do that? If you do an audio-only connection, that is very easy to do. I would call that phone a roadblock. And if that's an issue for you, remove the phone. You don't need it there. Number 4, what could you do to eliminate or improve those roadblocks? Like I said, remove the phone. Beyond that, though, because we can't just remove every single block like that. We have to be aware of the block and work around them. But do be thinking about those things. The 5th question, what one area will you focus on eliminating, improving, and how specifically will you implement it? And that goes back to the very specific thing that I talked about at the very beginning. When you say, I want to be a better podcast host, break that down into different elements. I'm going to enunciate my words. I'm going to speak more clearly. That's one thing. I'm going to shut up and let my guests talk. That's one thing. I'm going to edit my own interviews so I can listen to myself and know what I need to work on. Get very clear about what I'm doing in the studio by listening back after I've recorded those things. I worked with a lot of podcasters over the years, and I know how easy it is to do the same podcast. Let's put that in quotes. Do the same podcast every single time. You hit a plateau with your hosting, your delivery, your editing, your production skills, and that's easy to do. I use the example at the very end of this podcast. I'm always telling people to subscribe. And what do? I've got 3 buttons for you, one for iPhone, one for Android, and one is an RSS feed. I've got a 4th QR code if you want to scan that, not even have to touch the keyboard. You can scan that QR code, and instantly, magically, the podcast is delivered from the Big Podcast supercomputer to your phone. We get into it with our delivery. We get into it with our questions. One of the guys that I learned a lot from, this is an old school radio DJ, and I was reviewing his stuff with my producer, and we were talking about how he would do the same interview with bands every time. If a band come through, and he would say something like, "What's your influence for this record? What inspired you to do this record?" It was the same kind of question, maybe said in a couple different ways. And sometimes it was the same question said in a couple of different ways, back to back. So it was a question that he wasn't really being present to think, oh, I just asked that question. Do I need to ask it immediately again? We all get into that. There used to be a podcast that would ask the same 12 questions, a well-known podcast. The guy was kind of known for it. A lot of people make fun of it. It's kind of a joke in the podcasting space. You could have 10,000 episodes of this thing. It's basically the same episode over and over again. In fact, I don't think the dude would have needed to show up. He could have just had you record the answers. He could have plugged himself in. It had that very small level of interactivity. But we're all doing that. I mean, we can sit there, point the finger and think, oh, I'm not asking the same questions. That guy is asking the same questions. But yeah, we're asking the same questions too, doing the same interview, the same episode again and again and again. Are you doing that? Well, think about these 5 things. 1, what are you trying to improve? 2, what is your current process for trying to improve? 3, what are the biggest roadblocks to your process? 4, what could you do to eliminate or improve those roadblocks? And 5, what is one area that you're going to focus on eliminating or improving, and how specifically will you implement this? Used to know a guy, inch by inch, life is a cinch. That's what he would say. And it's true. Small hinges, big doors, take one thing at a time, and then start stacking them. Get that first one, add the second one. Get the second one, add the third one. If you want this full article, I've got it linked. It's in issue number 178, and the URL to go to newsletter.bigpodcast.com. Audacity 3.5. It is out right now, actually. 3.5.1. They did an update on the new release. This thing is great. I love Audacity, the number 1 program for audio production in the world. I want to say it's something like 80,000 downloads per week. That seems crazy, right? I've been using it for about 20 years. I've been using it to record this episode now. I will edit it in this episode. And there's some other things that I use, RX, Auphonic. I use different tools to clean up my audio just a bit. But as far as the recording and the editing, I love Audacity. The new version has cloud project saving, meaning if you and I are working on the same podcast, we can save it to the cloud. I can work on it. You can work on it. There's one thing that we're working on together. We don't have to switch files back and forth because these files can get pretty big. It makes production like that a whole lot easier. It's got pitch shifting. You want to hear what that sounds like? This is a pitch shifted example. I did that right in Audacity. It's got a simplified interface, and I love this. Audacity was originally made from music, just like Pro Tools, just like Adobe Audition, these other tools that we use. And that's great. The world is a better place because we can record music at home. But what we do as podcasters, mostly spoken word, dialogue, human voice, that's a different thing. And we do not need all of the things that a music engineer would do. So they simplified the interface, some of the things people aren't using so much anymore. It's worth a look. It is free. One of the things I love about the new version, if you're kind of skeptical of Audacity, you say, well, these plugins don't work. Yeah, they're working now. At least that's been my experience. I mentioned Isotope. They've got a $29 plugin. It is specifically for human dialogue. It is called VEA, Voice Enhancement Assistant, I think it stands for. Anyway, it's $29. Audacity is free. I've got the links to all of this at newsletter.bigpodcast.com. If you need to learn Audacity, I've got a guy who can teach you a great online course. Like I said, I've been using this thing for 20 years, 20-something years. And I learned things from this guy. His name is Mike Adams. I've got him linked at newsletter.bigpodcast.com. I think this is like $50 for the training, but worth it. Let me give you a specific example of how it's worth it. You know, I've voiced my own audiobooks. If you're familiar with the Big Podcast book, I've got a book that I did for musicians when I was specifically working in the music business. I've got a 101 templates book. And the 101 templates book, these are podcasting templates. That was the first book that I had ever voiced where I did everything, not only the voicing, but the editing, the post-production, getting it ready to send to Audible and other audiobook distributors. I did that all in Audacity, and I did it with the help of Mike Adams. If you're interested in getting into that, Mike can hook you up. Newsletter.bigpodcast.com for that, the training, the dialogue plugin to make your dialogue sound better, VEA, it's only $29, and the new Audacity 3.5.1, it is out now. All of it linked, newsletter.bigpodcast.com. 15 podcasting lessons from George Carlin. All right, these are comedy lessons. I'm hijacking them for podcasters. I think you're going to relate to these. I think George would have wanted it that way. We're all learning from each other, right? So I'm not stealing it. I'm just hijacking it regardless. Consider these. 1, tape everything. He was talking about taping shows, and I'm saying the same thing. I said it earlier. If you tape yourself and you listen to yourself when you're editing, you are going to get very clear on the things that you are doing that are maybe flubbing words, much more together, not speaking up, speaking too loud, these kind of things that you are not aware of when you are recording. I see this happen a lot with people who laugh. Ha, 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 ha. Ha, 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 ha. That's hilarious. It blows out the monitors. You can't hear the next guy that you're laughing at. It's just awful, man. Limiters, all this stuff. There's a reason we've got it. You're not going to necessarily know it because being in person, talking with people, even doing something via a Skype session or Riverside session, Squadcast, Clean Feed, whatever you use, it's different when you listen back to it. That is why you want to tape everything and review it. Second thing George Carlin says, challenge everything. This brings out my angsty teen. Walk into a room, boom, double middle fingers up, baby. I love this. Challenge everything. That includes what I'm telling you right now on this podcast. Challenge it. Don't believe me? Try something else. That's okay. This is how we improve. I talked about baby reindeer. They're not just doing the same thing. It's not I Love Lucy over and over and over again. It's a different kind of relationship. Speaking of I Love Lucy, though, the first sitcom to do a multi-camera shoot, the first sitcom to have 2 people sleeping in one bed, and an interracial relationship, and Lucille Ball, female-owned studio. Desi Lou. That comes from challenging everything. If she hadn't have done that, you wouldn't have had Star Trek, super nerd. Star Trek challenged everything. Put a black woman in command. Think about that with your podcast. 3, draw inspiration from artists and other media. This is me swiping this list from George Carlin. Yeah, man, this is how we learn. This is how I learned everything about podcasting from music. Music was what we distributed online first. When that happened, once we had a physical apparatus like a Kindle, books started happening. When technology got better, speeds got faster, hard drives got bigger. I'm only here because of what I was doing in music. And a lot of the stuff that I do, a lot of the technology that you use as a podcaster, that was borrowed from the music industry. We were the first people to sell digital media online in a big way. Number 4, create a unique stew. That is doing something that only you can do. Do we need another podcast? No. Do we need another podcast where you interview exciting entrepreneurs? No. But we need your podcast, bringing in your unique abilities, your background, your knowledge, your level of questioning and thinking and borrowing from others, and your attitude, double middle fingers up. That's the kind of podcast that we need. Do you have something like that? A unique stew? If you need help with that, reach out to me. Mastodon, Blue Sky, Threads. I'm great at spotting this thing. This is what I've done my whole career. It's like, well, let's kind of tweak this up. Let's bring more of this out because you might not even see it. We are so close to ourselves, sometimes we don't see the gifts that we are bringing and what's unique about us. You need somebody to look at you, give you a once over? Yeah, reach out to me. Number 5, don't sound like everybody else. That unique stew is one of the ways that you do it. Don't try to do what somebody else is doing. I hear people do this a lot with some of the main podcasters. Somebody like Adam Carolla, let's say. He'll say, well, we got to keep the pirate ship afloat. You can support us. He's got his line for however he introduces his ads. And I'll listen to a podcast from an independent. We've got to keep the pirate ship afloat. It's like the same line. Look, I get it. This is how slang happens. People say, no cap or whatever. We're learning from each other, right? Double middle fingers up. Let's coin that one, all right? This is how stuff gets passed around, and that's normal. But when it comes to your podcast, do not try to sound like everyone else. I mentioned this guy who has 12 questions. He has the same 12 questions on thousands of episodes. And a lot of people took that format and they would flip it a little bit. Instead of interviewing entrepreneurs, for example, they might interview pet shop owners, or they might interview public speakers, or they might interview gigolos or whomever. It doesn't matter. But they would take those same 12 questions, maybe modify them a little bit. And it's like, I see what you're doing, but that's not really creating a unique stew. Unique stew, that's multiple things, not just one little tweak that you make. But it starts with a tweak. And then like those skills, you're stacking them. You make that one tweak, and you put a second tweak on it, do a third tweak. There are 15 of these items. I'm not going to list them all here, but I do have them linked at newsletter.bigpodcast.com. This is issue number 178. I don't know where you are, but this is a joke. If you want to see the actual joke, it is at newsletter.bigpodcast.com. For this, the audio edition, I'm going to have a serious conversation with you, and that is that there is always bad audio to fix. Fortunately, we've got tools like Adobe Enhance. We've got iZotope RX. I talked about iZotope VEA, that $29 plugin. That is helpful. If you've been thinking about RX, and RX comes in 3 varieties. There is what they call elements, just a couple tools, a declick. It's not a demouth click. It's a declick for records. Pops on a vinyl record. That's what that tool was made for, although it will help with mouth clicks. iZotope RX Elements, that's enough to get you in the game. I think it's $50. There's another version, the standard version. Now that has a mouth clicking tool. It's got some other great tools for dialogue. Then there's what they call advanced. This is the one that I've got. It's got a noise isolation and some other advanced tools. I could be in the middle of an interview with a bomb going off. I would be able to take that boom out, and you would only hear the dialogue with iZotope RX Advanced. Unless you're doing field interviews, something outside of your studio, you probably don't need RX Advanced. Standard is enough for you. And here's the deal. They are getting ready to release iZotope RX 11. If you buy 10 now, and because 10 is older, because 11 is coming very soon, they're going to give you 60% off, and you get 11 free. If you're thinking, what? I'm not that committed to all this. I want to sound good. I don't have to sound great. Adobe Enhance, it's inexpensive. It's very powerful. I got it in Creative Cloud, my Adobe Audition subscription, which you can get, I don't know, $15, $20 a month. It depends how you do it. You can get Adobe Enhance for free, or you can use a very basic version of Adobe Enhance for free. I've got all this linked. It's at newsletter.bigpodcast.com. Look at this stuff. It will make your audio sound better. It's pretty much one-click betterment for your audio. There's no excuse for you to have poor audio these days. I've got all these linked, newsletter.bigpodcast.com. The Dave Ramsey imposter. There's a fake Dave Ramsey on the loose. I tried to let the real Dave Ramsey know, but he blocked me. Boom! Double middle fingers up. Here's what you need to know. Your listeners trust you. And because of this, and I've got the story linked, it's at newsletter.bigpodcast.com. I want you to keep this in mind. There are impersonators everywhere, not just for Dave Ramsey, but for people like you and me. Now, I'm not saying these people are actually on the street, go into buildings, trying to dress like us, look like us. It's usually on the form of Facebook, Instagram, social media. So when you think, nobody would try to impersonate me, yeah, it actually happens with a lot of mid-level podcasters because you do have that relationship with your audience. The Dave Ramsey story is actually really sad. Somebody had reached out to this woman. They had a fake Dave Ramsey site, and she somehow got connected to him because, you know, Dave's always trying to sell you some kind of debt reduction thing or something. And it was an investment scheme. You know, they took her money. I think she wised up before it got too late. But if you want the full story, the video of her talking, and all the details of the Dave Ramsey imposter that's on the loose, I've got it linked at newsletter.bigpodcast.com. I'm curious if you've had somebody impersonate you in any way. Reach out to me if you have. Mastodon, Blue Sky, Threads. Let me know your story. It happens. I've had it happen. I don't think it's because I was anybody in particular. I think that people just are trying to impersonate people all the time. Then go to your friends and say something like, hey, man, could you loan me $100 or, whatever. I mean, people are doing this stuff all the time. It's very creative. People say, well, why don't these guys get a job? Well, that is their job. That is their job. You can find out more about this, newsletter.bigpodcast.com. Classified ads for you. These are things that will help you to grow your podcast, make your podcast sound better, make your production easier. Swell AI automates writing podcast summaries, articles, social posts, and more. I love it because you can manage multiple shows in one dashboard. You can build custom templates for each show. If you use Google Drive, Dropbox, or Zoom, it will connect with those services and automatically get your audio into the Swell AI system. You will get automated episode notes. You will get AI blog articles based on your audio interviews. It is worth a look. You can try it for free. I have it linked at newsletter.bigpodcast.com. The $100 podcast studio from Focusrite. If there's one brand that I'm loyal to in podcasting and broadcasting, it is Focusrite. There are a few brands that I love. Electro Voice is one of them. I'm talking into an RE20 mic. I love Zoom. I've got a Zoom F3 field recorder backing up this episode right now. And the interface that I'm using is the Scarlett 4i4. You've seen these red boxes in podcasting studios. Those are Scarlett boxes, the number one audio interface ever. Focusrite has another audio interface that has the same preamps. It is called the Vocaster. And for $100, here's what you can get. The Vocaster 1 audio interface. I use this every single day on my office computer. It is great. So easy to set up. It is plug and play. They guide you through the process. You're going to get that, but also a Vocaster DM1 mic. This is like a Shure SM58, 57. It is a great mic. You're going to sound fantastic. You're going to get some studio headphones. You're even going to get the cables to use. Everything you need to record your podcast and sound fantastic for only $100. It's perfect for a solo podcaster or somebody who's only doing remote interviews. If you're in your studio connecting to people remotely, $100 is going to get you set up. If you need a second connection for your studio, they have a $200 podcast studio with a different mic. It's very similar to an SM7B from Shure. You're probably familiar with that. That's what Joe Rogan uses, Adam Carolla, all these guys that you think of when you think of podcasters. That is the mic that they use. And this is a very similar mic to that. It's based on that, the DM14V mic. It's got the XLR cables, everything you need for $200. So two options, one for $100, another for $200. They're on sale right now. They're not going to be on sale forever. If you want this deal, here's how to get it. Newsletter.bigpodcast.com. I've got a full review. You can also read there. Newsletter.bigpodcast.com. When you are ready, here's how I can help you even more. If you want the shortcut to building a podcast that people care about, this is what I've got for you, free of charge. Big Podcast Extra. These are short emails to help you build an audience, attract clients, and make money via podcasting. I've also got a podcast growth toolkit. I call it the Swiss Army knife of podcasting. These are forms that you can use for guests, forms you can use for music clearance, episode templates, title templates for your podcast episode titles, guaranteed to get downloads. These are things that I've tested over the years. Plug and play. Put your information into these templates. You're going to get more downloads for your podcast. I've got these two things free. You can find them at newsletter.bigpodcast.com. Also, if you're interested in going even deeper, I talked about the audio monetization program. I call it Big Podcast AMP. Personalized coaching for indie podcasters to help you grow your podcast audience, build your authority, brand, and reputation. It's cheaper than you think. I've got it all laid out for you at bigpodcast.com/amp. Go there right now. Read the letter. It's going to take you a minute because this is thorough, man. I want to make sure you're a good match for it. I want to make sure you know what you're getting into because it's work. But if you're willing to do the work, I can help you grow your audience. And as I mentioned, your authority, your brand, and reputation. Bigpodcast.com/amp is how to get started on that. Until then, I want to make sure you're subscribed to this podcast. Bigpodcast.com/subscribe. That will do it for you. That will make sure that every episode that I release comes to your phone, comes to however you get your podcast. I've got 3 buttons for you, one for iPhone, one for Android. One is an old-fashioned RSS feed. I've got a QR code that you can scan. I'm making it easy for you, man. I don't want you to have to jump through hoops to get this information, build your reputation, build your podcast, make more money, make your mother proud. You got enough work ahead of you to do that. Let me make this job easy for you. So subscribe to this podcast, bigpodcast.com/subscribe. Go there right now before you forget. Click one of those buttons, scan the QR code. I'll get you every new episode of Build a Big Podcast, helping you grow your podcast, make money, build your reputation. Do it now before you forget. bigpodcast.com/subscribe, and I'll see you on the next episode of Build a Big Podcast.